โมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนัมมัสสามิ Good evening and blessings to everybody listening tonight. In a few days we celebrate or commemorate the birth, enlightenment, parinibbana of the Buddha. And particularly at this time with the situation in the world, the spread of coronavirus, maybe more than ever, we might see the benefits of having the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha as a refuge. And the practice of the Dhamma, the Buddhist teachings, is particularly designed to help us to deal with the ups and downs of life, the unexpected things that come along, the challenges, the difficulties, and so on. And the Buddha always said, if you're in a desperate situation, you don't know what else to do, well, think of the Buddha. Just recollect the Buddha. So you can recollect the word Buddha or Buddho, the meditation word we use. And it's such a powerful word and the meaning of it and the qualities of mind that it brings up when you recollect with awareness the word Buddho or Buddha. It has a very stabilizing effect on the mind, brightens the mind, brings a sense of peace, inner peace, that if nothing else helps one to deal with whatever life is bringing one. As we know, life is full of surprises. At the moment, anyone living in Melbourne or Warburton, be aware, we've had several days of very heavy rain. They say the wettest autumn for 100 years. There's only a few months ago, Australia was struggling with drought and the threat of bushfire everywhere. And now there's storms and wind and rain and flooding even. And life is like that. Life is full of ups and downs. And last year there was no coronavirus. This year we have coronavirus. So to have the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha as a refuge is something that we can see is more valuable than ever, because the teachings of the Buddha and the practice we do brings up very strong, powerful internal qualities that help us to meet these challenges and changes. Many people at this time have been complaining of suffering from fear and anxiety for themselves, for their loved ones, and just for the world in general, not sure what will come in the future, how will people get through the pandemic. Will oneself or one's loved ones be affected, get ill, or even risk death? These are quite normal fears and anxieties to have at a time like this. And of course, as human beings, we're quite used to fear and anxiety because it's part of our makeup. Anyone who's born as a human being will sooner or later have to experience fear because of our basic attachment to this body and a sense of self. And once you have a sense of self, then you've got something that can be hurt or harmed or that can die, So then you'll have fear of loss, fear of pain, fear of death. If you don't have anything, then there's nothing to be afraid of. And this is why the reflection and the insight into not self is so powerful. Breaks through the delusion of self, and with it fear disappears. But anyone born in the world is going to come with fear. It's just natural, it's instinct. Part of it is helpful, survival instinct, that the fear that gets us out of danger, makes us run from danger, makes the adrenaline come out in the body, gives us extra energy and ability to maybe do something we normally couldn't do, to get out of danger or to deal with a particular problem that's arisen. That's just normal. I remember one time when I was in the forest, a friend of mine, a monk, was telling me a story about a village that was being plagued by a tiger that was killing livestock and threatening the people in western Thailand. And he said one night a couple of men went out with rifles to kind of protect the village, to go on guard duty in case the tiger came. And they were walking through the jungle, and they came across fresh tiger tracks. So they started stalking the tiger, following the tracks. They were very afraid, as people do. The more you talk about tigers, the more frightening they seem. But they're following the tracks, and meanwhile the tiger was up ahead, and it heard the men talking. And so it left its path and double-backed, came round behind the men, and so the tiger started stalking the two men. And they were walking along, following the tracks in their torchlight, and then they noticed the tracks disappeared, left where they'd been following. And at that moment they had the feeling, maybe it's come round behind us. So one of them turned to look around behind, and there was the tiger right behind them, waiting to pounce. And the man said his hair stood on end, his heart pounded very strongly. He was totally panicked. So he shouted out, "Tiger!" And at the same time, both men, they dropped their rifles and they scrambled up the nearest tree and ended up 3 meters off the ground on a branch. Meanwhile, the tiger that had been paused, waiting to pounce on them, was so scared by the man's loud shout of "Tiger!" that it bounced backwards. It jumped backwards several meters and then fled into the dark, and it was never seen again in that area. So both the men and the tiger were equally scared, and the men became heroes, not for killing the tiger, but for scaring it. So even tigers get scared. It's just instinctive for beings. Once you're born and you're still unenlightened, unawakened to the truth, you'll have attachment to your body, so you have fears and anxiety that come with that. It's quite natural and normal. But one thing, when you take refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, is that you're taking refuge in the noble ones, people who have practiced the Buddhist path of sila, samadhi, panya. They develop calm and insight into the selfless nature of this body and mind. And when that path is completed or perfected, then fear dissolves away. So the noble ones, and particularly the enlightened arahants, have no more fear because they've got no more attachment to the body. So we have that as a goal. And there are those who have practiced and achieved that. So we have teachers like Luang Por Chah who have confronted their own fears and anxieties and seen through them and managed to completely go beyond fear. It's not like, say, our teacher Ajahn Chah was born without fear. He was born like anyone else, with the attachment to his own body, all kinds of desires, ambitions, loves and hates, fears and worries. But he faced up to them and learnt about them and learnt to see them for what they are, as conditions of mind that can ultimately be let go of. Anyone who's read the biography of Luang Por Chah or heard the talks will know he tested himself on many occasions, and in particular one time, because he had such fear of ghosts, staying in a charnel ground, he had to meditate all night with his own fear, even to the point where he was too scared to get up and go and urinate. So in the morning his urine had turned to blood. But this is how he practiced. He wanted to understand fear, its cause, its root cause, and all the different anxieties that stem from it, and really let it go. We may not yet be ready to practice on that level, but still the basic principles are the same. Is that to deal with fear and anxieties, we have to understand ourselves. We have to understand our mind, our body, the way things are. And for that we need to develop the path of morality, mindfulness, right effort, and samadhi and wisdom. And really learn to contemplate our own experience and understand it better. Of course, we're not maybe on that level of Ajahn Chah, so you have to start with small things. So you start with small goals and small steps. So like when monks go off to stay in the forest, they're new to the practice. They may not yet have very strong mindfulness or samadhi or insight, but they do have their sila, the practice of precepts, basic morality, or the intention to live harmlessly is what one takes with one into the forest. And indeed life, whether you're a sangha or laity, you can use exactly the same principle. There'll be things that bring you fear, anxiety in your life, whether it's the fear of disease or fear of other people or certain places, situations. But if you have this starting point, the intention of goodwill, compassion, harmlessness in your mind, and you develop that on a daily basis, brings a certain steadiness and peace to your mind. It may not yet get rid of the things that make you fearful on the outside, but on the inside it brings up the right qualities to meet with some of these difficulties. And myself and many other practitioners I know, sangha and lay people who've gone into the forest, your bottom line is you have your practice of sila, precepts, just the basic intention not to harm, not to take advantage or harm others, whether it's humans or animals. This brings a certain wholesome quality to mind. And in Buddhism we even have this quality, hiriyottapa, which we call wise fear, sense of shame, wise fear of wrongdoing and the consequences of wrongdoing. So not all fear is necessarily a bad thing. This isn't a paranoid fear or pointless worries and anxiety that we often do get caught into, but this is the understanding of karma, that when we fall into unskillful intentions with our mind, based on anger, hatred, greed, confusion, selfishness, these intentions are actually harming us, harming our mental state, and maybe leading us to speak or act in unskillful ways. And that understanding leads to a certain fear or awareness of the danger, of the consequences of our unskillful actions. That kind of fear is considered a positive quality, a useful quality, because it keeps you out of trouble. It keeps you aware of your intentions and what you're doing, what you're planning to do, what you are doing in your day, and learning to assess and review your own activities, what you say and do through your day, and to learn to adjust, to abandon some of the more harmful intentions that lead us to harm others. Because even though we have fear based on our attachment to the body, a lot of our fear and anxiety is acquired through not looking after our mind, not being very aware of our mind. And the practice of hiriyottapa, developing this sort of skillful fear, aware of unskillful intentions, evil intentions coming up, and the danger and the consequences when we follow them through, can help to deal with some of that, because it helps us to be more on our guard, watching over our mind. And that brings one a sense of being prepared for whatever life brings. When we don't have that, we tend to run with all kinds of negative intentions very easily. When we're not very mindful and we don't have this alertness or awareness to the qualities of the intentions in our mind, then they can cause havoc. And a lot of our anxiety is created in this way. We lose awareness and we keep dwelling on things that are very negative, thinking about the worst outcome that can happen in a situation, whether it's at work or with our health or with our family. Just dwelling on the negative, giving unwise attention to the negative things, sets off and fuels a lot of anxiety in our life. So taking care to look after our mind and question and review, what am I thinking and how useful, how valuable is it, how true is it? Another way we get a lot of anxiety is from other people. Just as viruses are contagious, pass from one person to another in different ways, our mental states, our emotions, our negative emotions and positive emotions affect the people around us. So one way we can help the world at this time is not pass on your anxieties and fears to others. Maybe you notice them coming up in your mind, but have enough awareness not to spill them out into your speech and your actions. Because we do. When we're not very aware, we tend to let out our negativity in our speech, our actions, whether it's at work or at home, and we affect those around us. And some people around us are more vulnerable than us, especially young people or people who are already suffering for one reason or another. If we pass on too many anxieties to them, then that only makes their situation worse. And they call it emotional contagion. We can make everyone else very anxious, worried, upset, stressed by passing on our own thoughts through our speech and actions. So being more mindful how we interact with the world, what we say, what we do, not only helps us, but it helps others. And in the same way, if we are more mindful and take the time maybe to think more carefully about what we say, what we do as we interact with our family or work colleagues, we can save spreading some of this anxiety and maybe even provide some help to others. If others are anxious or worried, afraid, if we are more mindful, more calm, that can have a calming effect on them. So how we act, how we speak, how we act in daily life has a huge effect on our own state of mind and on others. And so you're learning to use the 5 precepts as daily guidelines to weed out some of the worst excesses of our fears and anxieties. Because fear and anxiety is like a bias of the mind. The Buddha said there's 4 biases of the mind. There's greed, hatred, delusion, and then fear. And the more we dwell on things that bring us fear, anxiety, well, the worse it gets. And we can create anxiety where there was no anxiety before, fear where there was no fear before, by dwelling on those negative thoughts without mindfulness, without awareness. And it's a bit like, so when I was a kid, I lived in a city, but we had one forested area in our neighbourhood, which in the daytime was a very pleasant place to go and play and walk through as a shortcut to get from one area to another. But at night it changed and became more dark, foreboding, mysterious. I remember when I was a kid walking through that forest, normally on my own I wouldn't think too much, I wouldn't have much fear or anxiety, but when walking in a group of friends, I remember one time there's one friend who got really scared at night. It was dark, and he imagined all kinds of shapes and things appearing in that forest that weren't there, but then he affected everyone else, so we all started getting scared and we ended up running home. And then for a long time after that, when going through that forest, we would always be scared. We'd be worried that there was something there, simply based on past experiences of our friend who had infected us all with his own fears. And it's like that in life. You tend to pick up some fear, some small anxiety, and then hold on to it into your mind. If you're not aware of what you're doing, then it can grow, it can build. Little by little, it can grow into something quite powerful that can affect your whole outlook, your perception of a place, or it could be a person due to some past incident with that person, and so on. And this is where the practice of mindfulness awareness, starting with our speech, our actions, but then also our thoughts, our mental state, the views and opinions we hold. By investigating them mindfully, we can learn more about ourselves and why we suffer so much. So obviously with coronavirus, the more you listen to negative outlooks, negative projections, the negative news about it, well, it'll tend to prompt you to feel more anxiety. That isn't to say to be careless with it and disregard news or disregard information you receive, but be selective and be aware of how it's affecting you. And then what you say to others. If we're always passing on negative information or complaints or fears and anxieties, well, it will tend to infect and affect them as well. You see the benefits of people who do practice mindfulness. They may still have fear and anxiety arising in their mental activity, but they tend to deal with it better. They tend to be more stable and more self-controlled. And so if they are in a situation where fear, anxiety arises, they tend to treat it better. I remember one time here, we had a retreat in the summer where people come, had about 100 people camping, meditating, and one of our meditation sessions we went walking single file, mindfully walking through the forest. And it's midsummer, so sometimes you get snakes around. Not often, but sometimes you see them. And this day, walking through the forest, a tiger snake came out and was just sitting on the edge of the path, wanting to cross the pathway that everybody was walking. And this line of roughly 100 people walking up the path started to see the snake, and you could see people's different reactions. Some people were fairly calm, others jumped out of the way, others screamed, others commented, some people warned their friends, a whole variety of reactions to the snake, which was just sitting there probably as afraid as anyone else. And eventually, so about halfway through this line of 100 people, the snake decided it was time to cross the path to get to where it wanted to go. So it shot across the path, not to attack anyone, just to get away. And the lady who was walking right at the moment when it shot across the path, just stepped right over it, but didn't say a word, just carried on mindfully walking. And later on, I asked her about that, and she said, well, she was practicing mindfulness, and she saw the snake. The snake didn't seem to be a threat, and it just crossed the path. So she just went in her mind, and she's going, Bhutto, 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 snake, Bhutto, Bhutto, Bhutto. And off she went, and didn't make a problem out of it, and didn't make a fuss about it. And that's somebody who's practiced mindfulness. There may still be some hesitation or fear in the mind, but she didn't make a problem out of it. She just mindfully dealt with the situation. Many of the things we are afraid of or anxious about in life are similar. If it's wild animals, generally they don't want to mess with you. If it's maybe angry, aggressive people, if you're not aggressive to them, then generally they don't want to actually mess with you or do much to you, generally. if we're self-controlled and we don't pass on our own fears, anxieties, aversion to others, then usually that you get a good outcome in different situations. Whereas if we give in to our fear and then speak or act, we tend to make things worse. And this, you see the benefit of mindfulness. It doesn't always remove the problem, but it changes your attitude and your reaction, and you tend to be more composed, have more goodwill, more of a sense of peace in your mind, so that you can deal with the situation well. This is why the Buddha encouraged us to practice mindfulness through meditation, keeping the precepts, wise reflection, because it helps us to deal with the ups and downs of life and the difficulties. And you'll notice one person practicing mindfulness in a group, workplace or at home, will tend to encourage other people to be more mindful around them. We don't always know what life will bring. We don't know what the weather will bring. We don't know when coronavirus will be cleared from the world, or when there'll be a vaccine, when we'll get back to work, or what we say normal. We don't know those things, but we do know our own mind. And if we put effort into training our mind and use some of these excellent teachings that the Buddha gave us, then we can be prepared for whatever comes up and deal with it in the best way and find some inner peace, even if outside, externally, things are not so peaceful. So like I was contemplating this morning. This morning is very stormy, winds blowing here, rain falling very heavily. There's birds everywhere in the forest, and they have to deal with that. There's branches falling, wind blowing. Can't be a very pleasant thing to be a bird at this time. But how does a bird cope with a storm? That sometimes you see them, they land on a branch, and the branch is already dead, and their weight, or the weight of the rain, snaps the branch right under them. But they just fly away. And that's the way birds deal with the unexpected things of life. They rely on their own wings rather than flying around trying to find the best branch and the strongest tree. They can't be sure of that, but they're sure of their own wings. And so any danger, they use their wings to fly away. So practicing training this mind is a bit the same. We're learning to look after the mind and rely on our own inner qualities. The kindness and compassion, the mindfulness, the wise reflection, wise attention that we pay to our own experience. These are what we can rely on. Whereas the world externally, we can't always rely on that. And this time is sort of exposing that, some of the insecurities people have because they've lost their job, lost some of their routine. They can't do what they normally want to do, go shopping, go to their entertainments, go here, go there. But if you have a refuge through the practice, you've been practicing, maybe you can deal with this kind of situation better because you've got something to turn to. Your own practice of mindfulness, your own practice of the precepts, practice of generosity, compassion, these very useful and wholesome qualities become a refuge at a time of insecurity because they are something that no one else can steal or affect very much because they're your own inner qualities. Externally, the world can be in a turmoil sometimes. Things are uncertain. Society can change, the economy can change, the environment changes. We can affect these things to a certain extent, and we should put effort into that, of course. But ultimately, what is our real refuge is in our own practice and developing these qualities internally. And that holds true right to the end of our lives, doesn't it? What is going to perhaps be the biggest challenge of our life is old age and facing death. Nobody can escape from that. And all the practice we're doing now is helping us towards having a good, peaceful, happy death. Our tendency with things that we fear, anxious about, is to push them away, resist them, push them away, suppress them. But if you train yourself in mindfulness, investigation, and developing some of the skillful qualities that the Buddha encouraged, you're actually helping yourself to address even the most difficult challenges of life, even death itself. How does someone die peacefully or well or happily? Is because they've trained their mind previously. When we get to the end of our life, it won't be so easy to practice. You can still practice, of course, but it's not the time to start practicing. The time is to start now. And maybe some of these challenges we have, like coronavirus or changes in the economy, society, they can be a stimulus to put more effort into our practice, to learn more about ourselves. Rather than succumbing to them, getting caught up into the fear, the anxiety, we can use these as things to learn from, experiences to learn from, and we'll become stronger for them, better people, more happier inside, more content inside, because we understand the truth better. That this human mind is something that can be developed in a good way, and in the long run, it's the most reliable thing we have. The qualities we develop through the practice, the Buddha called noble treasures. Our real treasure is internal. The treasures of the world are useful and we can do many good things with them, but we also waste a lot of them, fritter them away, or even use them in harmful pursuits. We still have conflicts and wars and rivalries and make a mess of things sometimes on the outside. But the noble treasures don't do that. The noble treasures are your real refuge, and they stay with you right to the end of your life, to the very last breath of your life. So I encourage you all to keep practicing. Use the Buddhist teachings, bring them into your heart, bring them into your daily life. We give a talk once a week, but you need to talk to yourself every day. Remind yourself of the teachings, put them into practice, because you'll get more value from them. We were looking at a sutta here the other day, and the Buddha said, your experience of happiness and suffering in the world is partly determined just what you fill your mind up with. So if you keep filling your mind up with negativity, worries, fears, complaints, well, you'll experience suffering. If you keep filling your mind up with mindfulness, compassion, wisdom, you'll have an experience, a totally different experience. You'll have an experience of well-being, happiness, and you may even be able to use some of that to help other people as well. So for tonight, I'll just say this much and encourage you all to keep up your practice, and may the blessings of the Triple Gem protect you, guide you, and we'll meet again. Dhamma